Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Reading from Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 14, Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes, text number 38. Korilana gela prabhu ke bahire phaya. Tara skandhe chadi aila tare bua iya. Korelana jela prabhu ke bahire paila. Tara skandhe chadi aila tare bula iya. Kore, two thieves. Lana, taking. Jela, went. Prabhu ke, the Lord. Bahire, outside. Paya, finding him. Tara, there. Skandhe, on the shoulders. Chadi, rising. Aila, came back. Tare, them. Bula iya, misleading. Translation and purport based upon Grace Srila Prabhupada. In his childhood, the Lord was taken away by two thieves outside his home. The Lord, however, got up on the shoulders of the thieves, and while they were thinking they were safely carrying the child to rob his ornaments, the Lord misled them. And thus, instead of going to their own home, the thieves came back to the home of Jagannath Mishra. Please repeat. In his childhood, the Lord was taken away by two thieves outside his home. The Lord, however, got up on the shoulders of the thieves. And while they were thinking they were safely carrying the child to rob his ornaments, the Lord misled them. And thus, instead of going to their own home, the thieves came back to the home of Jagannath Mishra. Purport. In his childhood, the Lord was profusely decorated with gold ornaments. Once upon a time, he was playing outside his house, and two thieves passing on the street saw the opportunity to rob the Lord, and therefore took him on their shoulders, pleasing him by offering him some sweetmeats. The thieves thought they would carry the child to the forest and then kill him and take away the ornaments. The Lord, however, expanded his illusory energy upon the thieves, so much so that instead of carrying him to the forest, they came right back in front of the house of the Lord. When they came before his house, they became afraid because everyone from the house of Jagannath Mishra and all the inhabitants of that quarter were busy searching for the child. Therefore, the thieves, thinking it dangerous to remain, went away and left him. The child was brought within the house of Mother Sachi, who was in great anxiety, and she became satisfied. This incident is also very elaborately explained in the Adi-lila of Chaitanya Bhagavat, 3rd chapter. Translation again. In his childhood, the Lord was taken away by 2 thieves outside his home. The Lord, however, got up on the shoulders of the thieves, and while they were thinking they were safely carrying the child to rob his ornaments, the child misled them, and thus instead of going to their own home, the thieves came back to the home of Jagannath Misra. Omagana timirandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshu unmanitam jena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate ganim yat kripa tamaham vande Sri Gurum dinataranam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nivesesha Shunyavadi Paskachara Tatarane. So, the 2 thieves, typical of low-class persons in the age of Kali, were not interested in serving a child Nimai or loving him. They were simply interested in the Lord's profuse golden ornaments, which had been given to him by many of the exalted Vaishnavis who had recognized the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead upon his appearance. Exalted ladies like the wife of Advaita Acharya, Sita Thakurani, and also Malini, Srivas Thakur's wife, and also Sachimata's own sister, who lived nearby. So these were just some of the many exalted members of the Brahmin community who had very generously decorated baby Nimai with all of these golden and silver ornaments and other precious gems. So these thieves thought this was an opportunity to steal. And of course this is a symptom of demoniac persons in the age of Kali. Again, they don't want to serve God or Krishna, worship him. They simply want to do business at best with the Supreme Lord. Just as people who are not interested in becoming an aspiring Gaura Bhakta, devotee of Mahaprabhu, they won't be very much interested in reading these exquisite childhood pastimes of Mahaprabhu. A child being kidnapped. It won't hold any attraction for them. But because we have been somehow or other by some good fortune being touched by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and this glorious Gauriya Sampradaya, so we're very interested to hear about these wonderful pastimes. Much chitta mat kata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantaschamam nityam tuschanti cha ramanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, their lives are surrendered to me, and they derive great bliss and satisfaction enlightening one another and conversing about me. So this is the business of devotees, to hear daily about Krishna's pastimes in all his different wonderful incarnations and appearances. In a delightful purport I read recently, which really resonated with me, because Prabhupada makes the statement that by just the first anga or limb of bhakti, which of course we all know is Shravanam, hearing about Krishna, one can get such a taste, the elusive paramdrisva nivartante, the higher taste of spiritual consciousness, which negates and removes far into the background any of the so-called other happinesses of this realm, this mundane realm, sensual happiness, mental peace, or intellectual or egotistical happinesses. They all become very insignificant for a devotee who has experienced that paramdrisva nivartante, that higher taste. And that can come simply by hearing about Krishna. Shravanam, of course, and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam, and then Vishnu or Krishna Smaranam. And and we know that this Shravanam, and especially Bhagavat Shravanam, is one of the big 5 most important activities of aspiring devotees of Krishna, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day, and also to live, when practical, Prabhupada does say, in a holy place like Sri Brajadam, Navadvip and Jagannath Puri, or New Govardhana, holy dhams. So that's very important, to chant the holy names daily, to worship the deity, and to associate with devotees. So these are considered the most important limbs of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And of course there's a wonderful example in Princess Rukmini, who only ever heard about Krishna. She was a princess, and many different exalted personalities would visit the palace of her father regularly, and from them, exalted Brahmins and their wives and kings and their consorts, they would come and they would tell Rukmini, there is this most exalted personality. He's not just another prince of the Yadu dynasty, as some were, some envious persons like Shishupal and others were. Now, he's a very exalted personality. And knowing that Princess Rukmini was not yet married, they would sing Krishna's glories. So then the time came for Rukmini. The time was appropriate for her to get married. And she wanted to get married, but she didn't want to marry anybody else except Krishna. And I think it was her older brother who was conspiring that she marry Krishna's sworn enemy, Shishupal. And somehow or other the father was a little under the control of his eldest son, so he was going along with that. But when Rukmini got wind of this, she was very upset. So she, being a princess and being very knowledgeable in Kshatriya, some diplomacy, and she understood, I have to take matters into my own hands here. So she wrote one letter to Krishna, asking him to kidnap her. Just as we have a kidnapping here, so there's been many kidnappings over the ages. So, but this kidnapping was on her terms, and she gave that letter, and she even gave instructions to Krishna what would be the best time for you to kidnap me, because I really don't want to marry this fellow, but I only want to marry you. So I've heard all about you. So that letter was given very secretly to one trustworthy Brahmana who took it to Dwarka, and immediately Krishna took that very seriously and had his chariot readied and went. And of course, very dramatic. Krishna says, I am adventure. So many wonderful adventures there in Krishna's pastimes we can become enthralled with and captivated by. And of course, Krishna did very successfully kidnap Princess Rukmini, and she became the Lord's first queen in Dwarka. There's another exciting kidnapping, because this is all about kidnappings today. So, and that is Samba, who is the son of Sri Krishna and Jambavati. And Samba, like his exalted father, was a little bit of a precocious child, always getting into mischief. Actually, Samba means one who's always very close to his mother, because his mother had to keep a close eye on her baby boy lest he get into trouble. And he did get into a lot of trouble. He was actually in the group of Yadu princes, boys, second generation, who on one occasion was dressed up as a pregnant young lady with a pillow indicating a pseudo-pregnancy. And sages and brahmanas who were in Dwarka, Narad Muni was there also, and these boys thought they'd be very clever and play a trick on the sages by asking them, what type of baby will this young lady give birth to, a boy or a girl? The sages were not impressed. They were Trikalaga, knowers of past, present and future. They could understand this is not a young lady, this is actually a ruse. So they said very sternly, this lady, who wasn't a lady at all, was actually Samba, will give birth to a lump of iron which will be the destruction of your entire dynasty. And when the so-called pillow was exposed, there in fact was a lump of iron. So Maharaj Ugrasena was quickly, hastily informed of this by the boys, and he took it very seriously, and he had that lump of iron ground up into iron filings and then thrown in the ocean. But it came to pass that ultimately, as we know from the latter portion of the Bhagavatam, that those iron filings manifested as reeds on the bank, and when the Yadus all went to Prabhas for a social picnic of sorts, they all got intoxicated on rice wine. They started to fight amongst one another. Started out as a quarrel, escalated into a full-scale fight, and they all killed one another because they were all powerful, and this was Krishna's arrangement that that was the only way his own dynasty, the work had been done. The Lord's pastime of coming and eradicating the irreligious kings prevailing at that time had transpired. So now it was time for Krishna to go back to the spiritual world and to take all of his associates with him. So back to Samba. He, as a young man, very much wanted to marry the daughter of Duryodhana, whose name was Lakshmana. And Lakshmana, being a princess of a great king, Duryodhana, she had the right to choose her own husband in a Swayamvara. So that was arranged, and Samba went there along with many other princes, but he was impatient, and he took matters into his own hands, and he kidnapped Lakshmana, put her on his chariot, and headed back in the direction of Dwarka. But he didn't get very far because Lakshmana's father, Duryodhana, and other great Maharatis of the time set out in hot pursuit, and after a very short time they overtook him and her, and there was a big battle. And Samba was captured, and he and Lakshmana were brought back to Hastinapur. And but what had happened in the meanwhile was that Duryodhana and the other leaders, they were somewhat impressed with Samba's chivalry. And they thought, actually, perhaps he could actually be a suitable match for Duryodhana's daughter. But they kept him prisoner there in Hastinapur. And of course, word quickly reached Dwarka that Krishna's son, Samba, has been captured. He's being held prisoner. So a delegation went, Uddhava and Lord Balaram, basically, and a small contingent of soldiers. They went to Hastinapur. And Lord Baladev and some of his soldiers, they stayed outside the palace in some palatial grounds. And Uddhava went in because Uddhava was very famous for his diplomatic skills. And he told Duryodhana, Lord Balaram's here. And Duryodhana and Balaram had a wonderful friendship. And that was one reason why Lord Balaram didn't actually fight in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He went on pilgrimage, holy pilgrimage, the whole time, came back at the end. Because he had taught Duryodhana the skill of club fighting. And so they had some affectionate relationship there. So ultimately, it all worked out. And Duryodhana agreed, consented to Samba marrying his daughter. So there's another kidnapping to set the tone this morning. And of course, in Lord Nityananda's pastimes, again, just as Lord Nimai was decorated very gorgeously, so Lord Nityananda, in his travelling all over Bengal, he and his associates, they would dress themselves in fabulous silks and turbans and jewellery, just to encourage people. There is an old saying, one should dress to please oneself. Excuse me, it's the other way around. One should eat to please oneself and dress to please others. So by dressing very opulently and with some jewellery, Nityananda Prabhu and his associates attracted many, many people. In the upcountry of Bengal, where he was ordered to go by Caitanya Mahaprabhu and preach, and not even come to the yearly Rath Yatra, but he disregarded that instruction of Mahaprabhu. He used to come anyway, couldn't stay away. And of course, some thieves on one occasion became very attracted to the jewellery that Nityananda Prabhu was wearing, and there is a wonderful, dramatic pastime of how they attempted to wait in hiding to steal the Lord's jewellery, but were ultimately unsuccessful. So, let's see. And back to, in the age of Kali, people not wanting to serve Krishna or love him, but just want to do business with him. They want to enjoy the property of God without God. And Prabhupada would often, in his preaching, especially in Bombay, quote leaders of political parties who would promise their constituents Ram Raj, the kingdom of Ram, if you just elect me as Prime Minister or State Minister. And Prabhupada always used to criticise that they want the kingdom of God without God. And of course, Ravana is an example often used. He had the audacity to actually steal the Supreme Personality of Godhead's own consort, Sita, and try to enjoy her separately with dire, fatal consequences. He paid a heavy price with his life by attempting to do that, even against so much good advice. And I heard an interesting pastime I'd never heard before from the Ramayana, was that in the events leading up to the great battle of Lanka, Lord Ramachandra, who is known it'll come back. It's just gone. But Mayada Purushottam, it came back. Mayada means conduct or etiquette, and Purushottam means the Supreme Person. So Lord Ramachandra, he embodies one who knows the best thing to do in all circumstances, the right thing, the righteous thing to do in all circumstances, and he did that in his incarnation. as Ramachandra. So on one occasion, before the great battle, he instructed his younger brother Lakshmana, you go to Lanka and you find out from Ravan what are all the wrong things to do, because I only know the right things to do. So Lakshman did that. He went there, and of course in those days, millions of years ago, there were codes of conduct between Kshatriyas. They would only fight on battlefields, they would only fight up until the sun set, with equal weapons and so on. So Lakshman was allowed to come there, and Ravana was relaxing on a colossal bed. So Lakshmana went and stood at the bedstead at the head and asked questions of Ravana, and Ravana just ignored him, didn't answer him, didn't engage. So Lakshmana came back to Ram and said he wouldn't talk to me. So Ramchandra said, well, where did you position yourself? And he said, I stood close to his bed, close to where he was lying, near his head. And Ramchandra said, well, that's the problem. You should have waited at his feet, taken a humble position. You go back and you stand at his feet and you ask these questions. And Ravana engaged and told him all the wrong things to do, all the bad conduct. So it's said in a fight, one should know both the strengths and the weaknesses of one's opponent. So this is an interesting pastime. And of course, as the battle progressed, and ultimately, but just before the great battle, where Lord Ramachandra had to rescue his kidnapped wife, Bibhishan, who was the younger brother of Ravana, he and a few of his associates, by mystic power, they were able to travel in the airwaves from Lanka to where Lord Ramachandra and Hanumanji and all the monkey and bear soldiers were waiting on the edge of the ocean. And some spies saw them hovering up in the sky, and they asked them who they were and what was their business. They were very suspicious. And Vibhishan confessed that he was the younger brother of Ram, but he'd, so to speak, seen the writing on the wall, and that his older brother was demoniac personality and had started this terrible event, kidnapping another man's wife. So he'd come to surrender to Ramachandra. Hanuman was very suspicious, and others. When this message was brought to Lord Ramachandra, the Lord said, and it's very famous in Vaishnavism, that if one just approaches me on one occasion and says, from this day on, my Lord, I am yours, then I promise, Lord Ramachandra said, to take full protection, to give that devotee of mine protection from that day on. That is my vow. So in that way, despite the suspicions of others, Bibhishan became welcomed in, and ultimately when Ravana was vanquished, Vibhishan actually became the next king of Lanka. So, and there's been a wonderful little piece of Prabhupada's speaking in a very jovial way. It's been doing the rounds. Some God brethren were kind enough to share it with me recently. Perhaps some of you have heard it also. It's very delightful. Prabhupada is narrating the pastime where Narad comes to Dwarka. And Narad has a special relationship with Krishna. Narad is basically a Vaikuntha devotee, but he is always trying to expedite Krishna's appearances in different incarnations speed things up. So on this particular incident, Narad comes to Dwarka, and it's just after the rigged gambling match. So Narad says to Krishna that this is astonishing. I'm incredulous. Your devotees, the Pandava brothers, and their mother Kunti and their wife Draupadi, they've just been banished to the forest for more than a dozen years. They've lost their kingdom, and their wife's been insulted. But they're very happy, very happy. And in fact, their love for you has increased. This is just bewildering to me. This is astonishing. And Prabhupada does quote Sanskrit. Prabhupada quotes the whole verse, but one word which jumped out at, and I wrote it down here, it's the word in Sanskrit for hypnotized. It's vasi kriyate. Kriyate. Vasi kriyate. Means hypnotize. Narad's saying, you've hypnotized these devotees, because even though all this adversity has come upon them, still they love you more. So that is the mystery. That is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, in his dealings with his devotees. And let's just see what else. We've got a few minutes here. Jumping around a little bit this morning, but perhaps Hare Krishna. So we'll go back to the fact that, yes, unless you're an aspiring Gaura Bhakta, you're probably not going to be very much interested in reading about Lord Chaitanya's abduction. Delightful pastime when Prabhupada first went to Africa. A little backstory. 5 invitations had come in almost simultaneously from different established temples in the world. This was very early 1970s. And Shyamasundar Prabhu was Prabhupada's secretary at that time. And Prabhupada was aware of all these invitations from established temples that he'd visited before. So he asked Shyamasundar, but one of the invitations was from Brahmananda Swami in Africa. Even though Brahmananda had not been in Africa for very long, and things weren't very developed there at all, he felt it was his duty to invite Prabhupada, not expecting that Prabhupada would even come there or consider it, but nonetheless he wrote a letter inviting Prabhupada to come to Africa. So Prabhupada asked Shyamasundar, well, where do you think we should go? And Shyamasundar said, well, we've never been to Africa, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, I was thinking the same. So they went to Africa. And of course, nothing was very developed, but nonetheless, Brahmananda tried his best to keep Prabhupada engaged in different preaching programs. First of all, they went to Mombasa. And Prabhupada had a relaxing few days there in the bungalow of one life member's house, a well-to-do Gujarati family. But after a few days of rest, Prabhupada was keen to re-enter the preaching field. So Brahmananda was doing his best. He did arrange one radio interview. He contacted a local radio station, and the manager said, all right, you can bring your Indian Swami. He thought it was interesting, Indian Swami with Western disciples. Yes, that could be newsworthy. So when Prabhupada went to the radio station and started talking on air to the compere, it was obvious that the compere knew absolutely nothing about Krishna consciousness and wasn't particularly interested, but somehow or other he had this guest who he had to ask questions of, and in the beginning it was the usual questions: why the shaved heads, why the robes, etc. So Prabhupada became a little impatient and tried to steer the conversation in a more serious direction by pushing across the desk to the compere one of his publications, either Back to Godhead or Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which had a famous painting of the Panchatattva on the cover. And Prabhupada pointed to the central figure of Lord Caitanya and said, "He is God." To which the compere said, "He looks just like a man." And at that point, Prabhupada became really annoyed, thumped the desk and said, "I say he's God, just accept it." And the man did. And the questioning became more serious from that point on. So sometimes acharyas can, soft like rose petals, but also sometimes powerful like thunderbolts. So I'll better stop there, everyone. Any questions, comments, or reflections? We have Bhakta Mike, second Bhakta Mike here in the temple.
You were saying that Narada Muni is a Vaikuntha Bhakta, and we hear that he's constantly travelling, through the material worlds and spiritual worlds. Does he also go to Goloka Vrindavan?
Yes, yes. And he appeared in Krishna's earthly pastimes. Yes, Goloka is situated topmost, so topmost Vaikuntha planets. So he can most certainly go there and enjoy those pastimes. And of course, in the Braj pastimes, he did. He was submerged in one kunda, but because he was interested and curious about Krishna's Madhurya pastimes, the gopis, but he couldn't participate in those in a male body, so he did immerse himself, or he was immersed in the particular kunda, and he came out as Naradi Gopi to associate in that form, feminine form, with Krishna in Braj.
And then descriptions of him in different literatures in Goloka Vrindavan, pastimes of Krishna. I haven't read the Caritamrita, but there's some description of
nothing's jumping out, Rupa Raghunath, that I've read to be, but that's a bit I haven't read everything. And perhaps in some of the Goswamis' literatures there are more deep in there. There are some descriptions of Narad in Goloka. Can anyone share anything? That's just to my limited reading, but maybe you can do a little investigation and get back to us. We've got a couple of hands popping up over here. Get back to us, Rupa.
Hare Krishna. Just on the pastime that Srila Prabhupada was talking about in the purport of Nimai being kidnapped by the thieves, I don't know whether I did read this in Chaitanya Bhagavat, but the people were really frantically looking for Nimai, and when they found him, they were so happy that they wanted to reward the people who brought him back. So it must have been that the thieves did not hang around, but if they had hung around, they would have got ample rewards for just taking Nimai Bharat. So that's his pastimes, spiritual pastimes, that he enjoyed it so much that they would have been rewarded without him actually assuming that they were stealing him. So it's almost like Krishna in Trinavata demon. He was also kidnapped by the demon who was going to dispatch him, but then he was having such a good time riding on the world. It was like riding on a roller coaster or something like that. So Krishna's very merciful like that.
Very good point. Yes, that's yes, they didn't hang around and they missed out, but they did get to take Nimai on an outing, transcendental outing. Ram?
I was thinking of a recollection that you told me recently about Krishna Rukmini, which really sort of portrays that sort of wonderful difference between Lord Ram, who always did the right thing, and Krishna's sort of trickiness. Maybe you can repeat when Rukmini was praising Krishna as a great king.
Oh yes, you mean the I think we all know how on one occasion Prabhupada writes delightfully how between husband and wife quite often there's joking pastimes. And on this occasion, Krishna was teasing his foremost queen, Rukmini, that it's not too late, Rukmini, for you to actually find a truly qualified husband of the royal order, because I'm living here in this Dwarka fort, surrounded on three sides by the ocean, because I have so many enemies who want to destroy me. And I'm actually worshipped by beggars, poverty-stricken fellows who wander about in an apparently crazy state in the forests, just chanting my name and so on. So really, it's not too late. You could. But Rukmini, of course, thought Krishna was serious, and she fainted on the spot. And Krishna had to personally fan her and revive her. And when she came back to consciousness, he said, "I was only joking," but she thought he was serious. That was the pastime, Ram, yeah? Okay. All right. We've got lots of hands now. Maybe we'll give Vaishnavi a comment, but the bells have rung.
For the class, you were talking on the topic of kidnapping. I was just thinking it's interesting, the role reversal where Usha and Aniruddha, where this time in the name of love, the male was kidnapped. Just on the point about kidnapping, it seems it's either for nefarious reasons like stealing, that in Lord Chaitanya pastime, or for the sake of love. So how would that apply in this day and age? Because it would be criminal to do such a thing, even in the name of love.
Yeah, good question. No kidnapping allowed. Kidnapping finished. Yeah. In Vedic times, it was a type of Rakshasa wedding where Kshatriyas would sometimes kidnap, but not so recommended. Yes, in this day and age, devotees will be promptly arrested by the constabulary and go to prison. So, not a good idea in Kali Yuga. Somebody else had we don't want to go too much over time. Ms. Prabhu, you want to quickly say something?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you very much for the class.
Hare Krishna.
I just have a question on illusory energy from Krishna. So it was very interesting in this purport that he had his illusory energy on thieves, and they took him back to his home. I have heard that Vrindavan is described as a very beautiful city, the one of golden jewels as well, that is also covered by Krishna's illusory energy. So we don't see Vrindavan as it actually is with our own eyes. And my question is, how do you recognize Krishna's illusory energy, and how do you see things as they are?
How do you recognize Krishna's illusory energy, and how do you see things as they are? Well, that's the whole idea. It's illusory energy, so you get covered over by it. There's Mahamaya and there's Yoga Maya. So often Krishna employs his Yoga Maya energy to cover his devotees, so that they don't know, they can't necessarily, and that's to enhance the Lord's enjoyment and pastimes. If, for example, in Vrindavan, if they were to, the confidential associates and devotees of the Lord, if they were to know him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then they would have too much awe and veneration, reverence for him. And that would impede in the loving exchanges, the joking, the scolding, the chastisement, that whether in friendship or parental affection or conjugal love. So for that reason, Krishna covers his devotees with his Yoga Maya potency, so they don't know, they can't recognize.
Yeah,
if that's helpful. Yeah, okay. You're welcome. All right, we're going way over. I'll get into trouble, Ruba. We can, we better leave it at that, Prabhu. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Caitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai.